All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is still Monday, July 1st, 2024. This is your evening tropical update. We are still talking about Major Hurricane Beryl, still a Category 4 hurricane in the Eastern Caribbean. It moved through the Windward Islands earlier today, no doubt unleashing lots of destruction and damage across parts of Grenada, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. The storm moved right over a few of the islands, and wind gusts were reported over 160 miles per hour as Beryl moved through. So, no doubt, one of the worst, if not the worst, hurricane of record in that area of the Windward Islands. Now, Beryl is moving away this evening and moving on into the Caribbean Sea, where the storm will continue a new leg of its journey. We also are going to look at the rest of the tropics this evening. The only other players we really have are what's left of Tropical Depression Chris, which is now just remnants moving into Mexico. Not much else to really write about that storm. But we are going to spend a few minutes after Beryl on Invest 96L. We haven't talked about it much, and some forecasts have changed with this system. So we are going to talk about the latest with that. But we begin, of course, with Major Hurricane Beryl. Satellite presentation here this evening on Tropical Tidbits is nothing short of amazing. This is one of the most powerful hurricanes we have ever observed in the Eastern Caribbean, period. And the last time we saw a storm this strong, was 2017 with Hurricane Maria. The storm that decimated Puerto Rico and was one of the costliest hurricanes in United States history was the last time we saw a hurricane this strong in the Eastern Caribbean. And I remind viewers that it is July 1st. So this is an unbelievable event here. The satellite presentation of Beryl is very impressive. Compact hurricane, but no doubt a very impressive one. The central dense overcast surrounding that eye is symmetric and beautiful with intense cold cloud tops surrounding the eye in all directions. Stadium eye, and there's mesovortices inside that center, all indicating Beryl is a very powerful Category 4 hurricane and could potentially be near Category 5 intensity. The Hurricane Center, as of 5 p.m. this afternoon, has a maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. This is only the seventh storm to ever attain this intensity in the Eastern Caribbean, and Beryl does have some potential to graze Category 5 intensity today or later on this evening. Beryl has about another 24 to 36 hours ahead of it where it will enjoy favorable conditions, warm water, and light wind shear before it begins to encounter some more of that as it moves towards Jamaica. We'll talk about that in a minute. Unfortunately, I'm having to record this before the next Hurricane Hunter flight gets in there. I work nights right now, and I've got to get some things taken care of before I get to work. And I'm going to just miss the recording time on NOAA 2's flight in there. But when the last Hurricane Hunter pass left the storm this afternoon, they were recording SFMR rates up to 140 knots, which that looks like a rain rate, and kind of contaminated SFMR doesn't really correspond with the flight level winds. But no doubt when they left the storm today, Beryl was a very powerful hurricane, and it appears that this flight will confirm if this is a Category 5 or still a top-end Category 4. I would say given the satellite presentation increase over the coming hours, the storm was left at about 1727Z, which when we go back to 1727 on the satellite, that was 1725. And I would argue that satellite presentation is much better than it was, 3 or 4 hours ago. So, Beryl also could have peaked in between. But bottom line, Beryl is a very, very powerful hurricane, and the Hurricane Hunters are going to get in there. We'll have that update on the Facebook page. If Beryl does attain Category 5 status, it will be the earliest on record by more than 2 weeks. That record currently held by Emily in 2005, which peaked around July, I think like 14th or 15th near Jamaica. So Beryl will have done that more than 2 weeks in advance of Emily's record. And of course, would be the only second time we've only ever observed a Category 5 in the month of July. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Hurricane Center's forecast track. And again, you can see that weakening occurring. So let's talk about that first. Why is that happening? Well, we can look at the HWRF and HMON hurricane-specific models. Our global models, when you get to storms this strong, don't handle intensity as well. They don't have the resolution to see just how strong Beryl is. But models like the HWRF and HMON here on Tropical Tidbits do have that. So we are going to look at the HWRF, and we have two different solutions. Now, the HWRF, as we take this along, notice how the central pressure doesn't really change. HWRF initializes today at 945 millibars, which is pretty spot on. Beryl at 18Z on today was at 944. So or it was at well, after 18Z, but still, the H-Wave is seeing the storm pretty much spot on with what we currently have for pressure, and it pretty much holds this intensity until it landfalls in Jamaica on Wednesday afternoon. So it doesn't think for the next 2 days that the wind shear is going to be impressive enough to weaken the hurricane, although it does see the hurricane maintaining intensity. Now, this is a different take from the H-Mon, another model that kind of does the same thing, and the H-Mon sees the storm a little bit stronger this afternoon, so it's a little over-initialized, but in the short term, it does begin to weaken the storm going into tomorrow. See how fast that pressure begins to rise from 6Z on Tuesday, which is 1 a.m. Eastern time, to about mid-morning, early morning on Tuesday. The system rises quickly as the H-Mon does see that wind shear becoming a significant issue. So we look at what that wind shear is. The European model here, again, Tuesday morning, showing a large trough developing in the upper levels over the Eastern Caribbean, over Cuba, and the stronger upper level winds moving across Haiti and Puerto Rico. And it looks like Beryl is just about to enter that area. And we can look at water vapor and confirm that that's definitely there. If we switch over to the satellite presentation, you can see Beryl right now. Notice how there's a lot of black around Beryl right here. That means that there's not much going on the upper level winds in the satellite, showing that Beryl has a very favorable environment right now, and that's why the storm was able to peak so much. And again, this trough still ventilating mass away from the hurricane, all helping Beryl right now. However, if you look right on the edge of the Dominican Republic, you can see the edge of this trough really starting to push in here. And as Beryl moves off to the west quickly, being pushed by the low-level trade winds, the storm is going to have to run into this. And this is overall a much more chaotic environment than Beryl has experienced to date. This is what the Eastern and Central Caribbean usually looks like this time of year. It's not all sunshine and rainbows like the storm has been able to enjoy. So, we had this very poorly timed atmospheric coincidence of an upper trough ventilating the storm and not much wind shear or troughing or anything else to disrupt Beryl. However, this is going to be westerly wind shear, which is also something the hurricane has not dealt with yet. And westerly wind shear, if the storm is moving quickly east and we have a westerly wind component, you have to kind of add those together because it's kind of like a headwind versus a tailwind for an airplane. An airplane's flying west, the winds are moving it west. It's not a big deal. But if an airplane is moving west and the winds are out of the east, you have that crossing of the winds, and it definitely will add into the experience, into what the airplane feels. And the hurricane is going to be kind of doing the same thing. You have this quick westward motion at 20 miles per hour, and then you probably have 15, 20, 25 knots of shear out of the west. That winds up being 20 to 25, maybe even 30 knots of shear as it gets into the Central Caribbean Sea, and that will absolutely begin to impact the hurricane. So we know Beryl is going to weaken to some degree as it gets into the Central Caribbean and Western Caribbean. The only question is how much does it weaken? And folks in Jamaica and on the tip of Haiti probably want to keep watching this very closely. And, of course, the Cayman Islands after Jamaica also want to watch this very carefully. This could be a very powerful strike for Jamaica, maybe the worst they've had since 2005. So let's go ahead and take a look at the future track, because that's also a lot of concern for the eastern U.S. And we are over here on Tomer Berg's website. And again, the ensemble models are still indicating a potential turn after a date with the Yucatan Peninsula. It looks like Belize, or Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, is going to get this one on the nose. And there's really been high confidence up until this point. But you can see after that, there's a lot less confidence about where the storm might wind up down the road. Well, this is because a big ridge of high pressure is guiding Beryl along for the next couple of days. Okay, this is Tuesday afternoon on the European model, and we have a pretty classic ridge right here with the ridge axis moving up into Canada. Very poorly ridge-drawn axis, but it is one. Give me a break, I just woke up. So, but off to that west, we have a trough beginning to erode that ridge. This ridge is going to break down and slowly move off to the east. So the storm right now is under the influence of that ridge, and that is generally keeping the storm moving in this direction. So Beryl is just going to go up under that ridge. Now, as we go into the next couple of days, the ridge begins to move, and by the later part of the week, this trough has broke the ridge down and kind of moved it away. And what's happening is a weakness is developing on the backside of the ridge. So now the flow is like this, Beryl moves in, but then as we go into the weekend, the trough has pretty much moved over, and now the ridge is offshore. Well, this is how the rotation is right now. and Beryl would be somewhere right here. And now there's a big weakness, and Beryl could want to track towards that weakness. Now, this is kind of late in the forecast track. If the storm was going to be right here, then it might be more of a direct path, but because it's going to have to turn, it might not be able to fully make that turn up into Texas and or Louisiana, but some models do indicate that is possible. But that breaking down of the ridge is what we're going to see late this weekend, and then, you know, there is some potential that that trough does hang out into early next week. So if Beryl winds up slowing down, you know, eventually this might want to turn northward. So I think folks in central and eastern, or central and western Louisiana through Texas need to completely and still totally watch the forecast for Beryl, because things could be changing by this weekend. But otherwise, I think if you're in Florida or, you know, the Carolinas or something, you're obviously good. And then even in the central Gulf Coast, Mississippi, Alabama, probably not going to see direct impacts from this one unless it takes a really hard hook at the end of that forecast period. So that's the latest on Beryl this afternoon. I want to quickly get to Invest 96L. This system has not done very well this evening, and this is because Beryl's influence is starting to impact the storm. The Hurricane Center has been dropping the chances of formation. This was up to, you know, 60, 70, 80%, and now it's back down to about 50% and just 20% in the next 2 days, indicating this may get to the Windward Islands before it even begins to develop. And satellite presentation can kind of show us why. We're going to zoom out to the water vapor here. And often when you have a very strong hurricane, you have a lot of mass leaving the storm. Well, that mass has to go somewhere. That air physically has to move somewhere else. And when you move mass away, it has to build elsewhere. And what's happening is you have an upper high building in behind Beryl. And what's happening is all that dry air that was draped over Beryl but never bothered it is now being forced downward into the path of 96L. We can see that the satellite presentation, this area of like these low cumulus clouds are all indicative of dry, more stable air. So the storm right here is getting constantly eroded by that northern edge of that dry air and more stable sinking air. So the storm is having a hard time developing thunderstorms in a much more stable environment. And this is a direct impact of Beryl's outflow. It's not in the classic jet wash sense where it's just blasting the storm like with a fire hose, but it is building this upper like ridge behind the storm. So the trough's here, kind of got a ridge here, and you've got this air pushing down ahead of 96L, which is kind of hindering that storm's development chances. And this is something that's going to be a problem. Sometimes when a weaker storm goes ahead of another wave, you can kind of clear the way, but then this one has to die. It can't be a Category 4 hurricane, because then it's going to impact what's behind it. So in this case, Beryl is so strong that it's actually harming 96L, whereas if Beryl was weak, it might just be plowing a path for 96L. Oh, and there's the impact of the potential upwelling ahead of the storm. So this wave moving across where Beryl was, it's not going to enjoy the same amount of warm water that Beryl did. Current forecasts from the ECMWF and GFS do have this eventually developing sometime around the Windward Islands, and folks there should still be expecting the potential for a tropical storm on, later on this week. But, and I said later on this week, I say it about 48 hours from now. So we're going into, maybe Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. This could be an issue. But given the satellite presentation right now, we're not talking about anything too impressive in the short term. But some models, again, eventually do develop this storm. And I do want to leave us off with the fact that if this storm does get going, it's going to be somewhere at this point around Jamaica or Cuba. And if this trough is still here and this storm gets a little stronger, I don't want to write this off as there's no potential impact. Some models are still bringing a fairly strong storm into the Gulf of Mexico sometime in the first week or two of July. So I would not be writing off 96L yet, but this has a long and arduous road ahead. And it looks like when Beryl leaves the Caribbean, there's going to be a lot of wind shear moving in behind it. You can see Beryl by later on in the week. This is Monday. Our other wave may be somewhere right here, and it would just be getting blasted with wind shears. So, 96L, I wouldn't write it off, but it's going to have a hard time over the next couple of days, that's for sure. That's what I got for you guys this afternoon on your update. We will be back, probably tomorrow afternoon with another video. Until then, we'll have all our updates on Facebook. And if the Hurricane Hunters do find Beryl as a Category 5, you will see it there first. So that's what I got for you guys this evening. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.